That is the essence of science. What sort of predictions does it make that we could test against empirical data and either corroborate the hypothesis or falsify it? And one of those predictions, at least in Kent's interpretation, is that the Earth is 6,000 years old. Now, if that were the case, we would have found that to be the case using radiometric dating methods. When we do that, we find that the oldest rocks on Earth are something of the order of 3.8 billion years, not 6,000 years. And even here in Michigan, we have bones that we can carbon date that are more than 6,000 years old. And so I don't see how, within the scientific methodology, one can say that creation as a theory is anything but falsified. Now, we could carry that further, but in order to do so, we would have to make the Genesis hypothesis more precise. And one of the terms we've got to pin down is this word, this term, kind. What is a kind? And I put that question to Kent right now. Yes, please speak. On my time.
On your time?
You may speak on my time.
Oh, okay.
So that I can...
I guess I would like to maybe ask you a question also to go along with your question. What is a species? A wolf and a dog are classed as a different species, yet they are interfertile. We have Canis lupus, Canis domesticus, so there's never been a good solid definition of species either. I would say the average 5-year-old could tell you if two animals are in the same kind. For instance, if you get a horse and a zebra, they're probably the same kind of animal. But a horse and a banana are not. So I think it would go back to the micro-macro evolution. All we've ever observed is animals bringing forth after what anybody of average intelligence would consider the same kind. A Great Dane and a Chihuahua, though they're very different, are still the same kind of animal. So I can't give you a solid definition of the word. I can tell you things that obviously are not the same kind, the horse and the banana. And I can tell you that the evolution theory does say the horse and the banana came from a common ancestor, and I can say that's not science.
But it seems to me that if God created kinds and revealed this in Genesis, that it should be known with sufficient precision that you'd be able to begin to state some of the properties. Specifically, what I'm looking for is what the genetic boundaries might be. For example, it is problematic with domestic dogs, and particularly their relationship to wolves. And the thinking is right now that actually dogs are wolves. The genetic data for a very close relationship of dogs to wolves is simply compelling. And coyotes are not much more distant. So would you consider those distinct species? Where would you put an animal like a dingo in relation to those, or a hyena, for example? Are they a distinct kind, or are they the same kind? And how can we delimit these boundaries so that we can begin to test whether it's plausible that there were distinct creations of these? And as I said earlier, it's essential that the theory be elaborated in a sufficiently precise way that we can make these tests. And let me speak actually to this issue of what is a species. This is my area of research, and to be honest with you, I don't know. Now, actually, and this is a pervasive problem, or a pervasive topic of discussion, let me put it that way. It's really not a problem in evolutionary biology. I just came back from an international ornithological congress during Durban, South Africa, and there was a whole symposium devoted to species definitions, and believe me, it was very contentious. However, Darwin, in a sense, wrote The Origin of Species, but he also created the problem, what is a species? Because before Darwin's time, before Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, there was no problem with what a species was. It was each individual distinct act of creation. But what Darwin said is a species arises in a continuum. And the problem is that when we see species, we see distinct entities. Even though wolves and dogs can interbreed, anyone, at least anyone better, be able to tell the difference between a dog and a wolf. There is a profound difference between them. And there's this discontinuity. There are really few intermediate forms. There are no intermediate forms between bananas and dogs, or whatever example Kent gave. And the problem with defining species, I argue, is the same as that in defining kind. A process of evolution has occurred, and as a result, there are circumstances, there are situations that are in transition. One of the groups of birds that I work on, the flickers, the red and yellow shafted flickers of North America, are a prime example of two entities that were recognized as distinct species. They were described as such actually, I think by Linnaeus, and certainly recognized as such by Audubon. And then suddenly, one day, there was a small hybrid zone found on the Great Plains, and it was found that they interbreed. It's a case where they are in the process of speciation, and this is why evolutionary biologists have a difficult time defining species. There are these intermediate situations. But Genesis, special creation, it seems to me, doesn't predict that. Why would a creator create things that were sort of capable of hybridization, that were intermediate, that weren't clearly defined? I simply don't know.
Well, I would point out that probably the two types of birds that are now creating a hybrid zone may have indeed come from a common ancestor. It was a bird. That would again be just a classic example you just gave of microevolution. That's not an example at all to help, the general theory of evolution. What I've seen is exactly what I predicted at the beginning. There will be lots of examples of microevolution, and then people are left to make the giant faith of leap and logic into believing that that somehow proves the whole general theory of macroevolution. You gave us an example of two types of birds that are able to breed together. You asked what is a kind. I don't know that I can answer the question.
Yeah, well, are all birds one kind?
No. I don't know how many original kinds of birds there were. There's probably a lot of new varieties today.
Can we, then, regardless of how many kinds there were, maybe we could figure that out if we could determine what distinguishes one kind from another in a genetic sense. What is the barrier? When would we know that we've crossed from one kind to another?
I think that is a very valuable area of research, and that's the type of research scientists ought to be doing. That's perfectly legitimate. That has nothing to do, though, with the general theory of evolution.
Well, I think it has everything to do with it, and in order to begin to do that sort of research, which actually I do, and I'd love to get some more funding, perhaps from you or related groups, but first, before I could write a sensible proposal, you'd have to tell me what a kind is, so I could begin to figure out what it is that I'm